Welcome to the Wizarding Wireless Network with me, AJ.
And me, Will.
Together, we will be bringing you our no-holds-barred thoughts, opinions, and detailed analysis on all things Wizarding World. So with that in mind, grab a glass of fire whiskey and settle into this week's episode of the WWN. Anytime today, dear.
Just wetting the whistle.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the Wizarding Wireless Network with your hosts AJ and Will, streaming on all your favourite podcast providers and on YouTube. On today's show, we'll be talking about our opinions on all things spells.
Oh, I've been waiting for this episode. Waiting for it.
So let's kick things off with favourites. If you had to pick your top 3 spells, what would they be? And why?
What would they be and why? Okay. Number 1, Pure Totem Locomotor.
Okay.
For one, a very complex spell.
Okay.
Transfiguration, very complex branch of magic.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a phenomenal event in the books and films when that was cast that one time.
Are you just slightly biased?
Yes, I am. But it was very cool. I do feel, though, that in the films it was great, but considering the fact that she did it on the statues, the tables, the suits of armour, everything came to life. Everything. It wasn't just so much the statues in the Great Hall, well, outside the Great Hall, that were only there for one film. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It didn't do it quite as much justice in the film as it did in the book.
No, the films never do. The films are fab, but the books are always better.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is one of my favourites. Number 2, I mean, this is in no particular order, I must say.
Mm-hmm.
I do like Expecto Patronum.
Okay.
I feel like it's a spell that comes from a place of strength, and it is the beacon of hope in such dark times that I think everyone can deal with.
Okay, very deep.
I know it's very deep. But I like the fact you can personalise it.
True.
It's
true.
like a wee spin on it.
That's true. It's not the same for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not like a stag or a lion. You could end up getting a salmon. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And number 3, I mean, there's so many to choose from. There is honestly just so many to choose from. But I really don't know. What's yours?
So I think number 1.
Mm-hmm. Is this in any particular order?
No. So again, no particular order.
Right, okay.
Top 3 would probably have to be something like the Bubblehead Charm.
Okay.
Because actually, I'm all for practicality.
Okay.
With spells, and actually the idea of being able to have a bubble and actually go underwater.
Mm-hmm.
Love that. The only thing is, the way they put it in the movies is it looks so unstable. It looks like it could burst at any moment.
Okay.
I think number 2 would have to be some sort of transfiguration spell, but I don't know quite what. I don't know whether it would be like the ones that you see in the games where it's like Draconophores and like turning like statues into like real things.
Yeah, Avifors.
Avifors. Yeah, that kind of like those spells, whether or not it'd be something like that, or like you said with like Pure Totem Locomotor, like actually just kind of commanding actual inanimate objects.
Mm-hmm. Food for thought, isn't it?
Yeah, I think actually probably human to animal transfiguration, similar to what Mad Eye does.
Okay.
So it would be a case of like, if anyone's really annoying me, just be like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Percy Weasley did that to Pius Thickness in the books. I mean, Voldemort didn't kill him in the books.
Mm.
I think Percy turned him into a sea urchin.
Yeah, and I think actually like it's quite an underrated and like but very useful spell of like if you're actually battling someone, but that's quite useful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe a third, as in top 3, I think purely aesthetic wise would be Expecto Patronum.
Okay, fair enough.
Purely because of just the way it looks. I mean, it's got one use and one use only.
Yep. Well, 2 uses.
I suppose sending messages,
Mm-hmm.
like projecting yourself, I suppose. But it's a very niche spell.
It's a very niche spell, but I absolutely love the thought of, instead of like texting or phoning someone, it could just be like your big booming voice coming over this Patronus form of like a tiny cat and just going, bring home milk. You know, instead of like something like that. It would just be such an over-the-top way of communicating a simple message.
Could you imagine in Chamber of Secrets, instead of howlers, it's just Patronuses just flying in?
But less messy.
So, speaking of Patronuses, what's yours?
Do you know, God forgive me for saying this, but I genuinely can't remember.
That is almost blasphemy.
It really is. I feel like I've done it that many times, but it's one of these things where I can justify it because it does change on depending your personality at the time. Like Nymphadora Tonks, when she was infatuated with Professor Lupin in the Half-Blood Prince book, her Patronus changed to a werewolf, which is pretty badass.
I would agree that actually to have that defending you, you couldn't get any better.
However, let me actually check as we sit here, dear listeners, what my Patronus is on the Wizarding Passport. Part of me thinks it may actually be a salmon or a wolf.
Are you just going to kind of like Magikarp them and just like flip your tail at them?
Well, exactly. That's what I mean. I mean, it's a bit pathetic, really.
You're going to like swim through the air and just give it a bit of a tail slap and get them off.
Yeah, I mean, I want something that's a bit decent to defend me against.
Harm some damage.
Something that, you know, does a bit of damage, you know, as opposed to something that I would eat on Christmas Day as a starter.
Yeah.
My Patronus is a fox.
Okay, that's slightly better than a salmon.
Yes.
Sorry to all you salmon listeners.
Absolutely nothing wrong with a salmon. Absolutely not. But foxes are quite cute.
Yeah.
And they laugh quite funny.
Not so funny when you're getting them at like 3 a.m. outside your window.
Oh, it's just like white noise to me now. See, that's the problem with you living in the country and me living in the city. I can't sleep in silence. I need to have some form of like background noise ongoing.
Oh, for me, like any form of noise outside just creeps me out. Like I've got to have like no street lights, no light outside, nothing. I mean, a fox could do some damage.
It could do.
Yeah. It could easily defend you. Very quick, nippy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see that working. Would you have a London fox?
A London fox or a street fox?
A street fox, or would you have an Arctic fox?
I don't know. I mean, I suppose they are both pretty brutal. Two very defensible creatures.
Yeah. Or
defendable, I should say. I mean, Arctic fox, are they white?
Yeah, it would work quite nicely.
It would work quite well.
The aesthetics would be there.
What's yours?
So mine is an eagle.
Right.
And I was quite happy. I was very shocked at it. It wasn't what I wanted and it wasn't what I was expecting.
What did you want?
I really wanted a whale.
A whale?
A whale. Like this big, fuck off, mahoosive whale.
Okay.
Coming out and just like barging everything out the way.
Fair enough.
But I got an eagle. I'm quite happy to settle for an eagle.
I would be very happy with an eagle.
It swoops around. It can claw at things. It can kind of like attack. It can peck. You know, it works. So I'm quite happy to settle for an eagle.
I mean, it could be worse. It could be a fox.
It could be a salmon.
It could be. The only thing that I can really think of a fox doing, you said that, you know, your eagle can swarm, it can swoop, it can peck. I can raid through a bin. I mean, that's it. I know when there's a good bit of rubbish.
You know where the food is. You know how to eat.
I mean, well, yeah, that's true.
But I suppose, like, if you think about it, it's not even... I say the eagle can fly about, but at the end of the day, like, if you think about how the Patronus works, I mean, Luna's is a hare.
Yeah.
And it bounces around the ceiling. So it's not limited to walking on ground.
Oh God, no, absolutely not. Do you know whose Patronus I really do like?
Go on.
I love Cho Chang's. She's a swan.
That is, yeah.
Right. And as elegant as it would be, you know, have you ever seen a swan when they're angry?
The aggression.
It's the hissing and the flapping of the wings. They are terrifying.
And the teeth.
And the teeth.
The teeth.
I know. It's just such a nice Patronus.
Yeah. To be like, can you imagine just defending yourself off, but it's like you've got such poison elegance that you just kind of like expect a Patronum, and then just a swan just kind of just swoops out and just kind of like flies towards them.
Mm-hmm.
Like you couldn't be any more kind of pretty.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you had a peacock. Now, could you imagine that? A proud as punch peacock coming out and then all of a sudden, beautiful feathers, everything, everywhere, all at once.
And just the shockwave from that.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anywho. Right, here's a question.
Go on.
Is there any spells that you think, what's the point?
I think something like Demimble-Wimble.
Demimble-Wimble.
I think the trouble for me is like it's spells that have the exact same effect as like a potion or something else that's available.
Yeah.
It's like, why would you go for the spell option versus a potion option or vice versa?
Well, right, see, this is the thing that I have when it comes to potions. They are very lengthy in brewing. They can be quite laborious.
Yeah.
It's a lot of effort. And if you've got a spell to do the same thing, one incantation versus X amount of times doing potions. I mean, think of the Apologist potion. Surely there must be a spell or a variant like that. For example, like a Disillusionment Charm. Are you not better off just casting that as opposed to spending a full month brewing an Apologist potion? Depending on how skilled the wizard or witch is at doing the Disillusionment Charm.
Yeah, I suppose that's what it comes down to. It's kind of, it's whether you're better at one or the other, because it's like spells can go wrong.
But then again, so can potion.
So it depends on what your strength is.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose the argument is actually if you've got a way of doing it both ways, then it's whatever you have your strength as.
Mm-hmm.
I think though, for me, the kind of most useless one would be Reducto versus Bombarda.
Well, exactly.
They are, in my opinion, the exact same spell.
Exactly. I do like Bombarda Maxima.
I don't either.
Why?
I think the trouble is, it's like, what, for me, it's like the only spell that they use that has like Maxima at the end of it. It's like, surely it's the intent behind it that determines how strong the spell is, not you've got a mild, medium, and a strong version.
Well, yeah. But then again, albeit you're saying that that's the only spell with Maxima at the end of it, think about Protego Maxima.
But then does Protego Maxima work as like a chain spell, so you have to say it multiple times, or can you like...
Potentially.
Because then I think for me as well, like talking about things like Protego is like you've got Protego, you've got Protego Maxima, you've got Protego Totalum. Like there is just so many variations of the same spell. They all do slightly different things. But again, like, what's the point of having like a spell that has like multiple versions of it? Like surely it's just a case of maybe the way you cast it or the intent behind it. That determines kind of what it does.
Because like you were saying about Reducto and Bombarda, you do have various levels, I would probably say, of intended effect or for dramatic effect, because you've got Reducto, then you've got Bombarda.
Yeah.
Bombarda Maxima. Confringo.
See, Confringo, I can forgive Confringo a bit.
Pourquoi?
Because it's more of like a fireball than necessarily just
An explosion.
Like, yes, there's an explosion at the end of it, but it's essentially a fireball. Whereas, like, in the films, the Bombarda and Reducto thing,
it's the exact same.
It looks
visually
it's the exact same thing. It is a projection that explodes at the end of it.
Yeah.
Or makes something explode. So I don't really see where the difference is. So for me, they do the exact same thing. And you can localize it because Hermione does it on a lock.
Yeah, in Prisoner of Azkaban.
Yeah. Whereas Ginny then uses Reducto on a mannequin and it blows the mannequin up. But at the same time, she then uses it on the Death Eaters and the entire Hall of Prophecies comes crumbling down.
Yeah.
They're the same thing.
Yeah.
What would be yours as the kind of spell that you would deem like unnecessary?
I wouldn't say not worthy, but there is one that just sort of kind of pops into my mind, and it was at Depulso. And I don't really understand the need for it, because you've got Accio, which is fair enough, bring stuff towards you.
Mm-hmm.
But then you've also got Depulso, which pushes things away. Which, look, what's the point? Because if you want to lift something heavy, Wingardium Leviosa, move that to one end of the room, or what have you. If you want to push someone away, you've got Flipendo, the knockback jinx.
Yeah.
So what's the need for Depulso?
I suppose so. But I mean, like, if you're thinking like in an attack dueling situation, I suppose if you've got someone who's going, like, you've got a group of enemies that are getting too close to you, at least then you can kind of push them all back so you've got a bit more space.
Or you could just do Reducto, Confringo.
On yourself?
Not on yourself.
I think that's the thing. Like, at least with Depulso, it doesn't affect the caster. I suppose if you use Bombarder or Confringo on the floor next to you, you're going to get blown up too.
Yeah, I suppose so, to an extent. But then if you've got a big group of enemies running towards you, and if you wanted to, get rid of them, Impedimenta, Immobilis. And then if you slowed them down, you could probably pick them off a bit easier without causing maximum damage to yourself.
True. But I suppose if you want to be like stealth and go around and just push people off the cliff.
That's a lot of effort. And what cliff are you on with a big group of enemies?
There's a lot of flying Hogwarts Legacy. There's plenty of cliff faces.
Oh, that is, to be fair, yeah.
That kind of... Okay, so you've got Depulso, you've got Flipendo that kind of do the same thing. It's like a knockback jinx.
Mm-hmm.
What about Expelliarmus?
Well, that's purely for disarming. Allegedly.
I'm not the only person who's brought this up.
Mm.
But essentially, in a few of the films, Expelliarmus is just for disarming, taking a wand out of someone's hand. Yet, there are plenty of occasions where Expelliarmus is used to knock someone clean off their feet and throw them across a room.
Exactly.
Case in point, Chamber of Secrets in the Dueling Club.
Prisoner of Azkaban with Snape.
And Prisoner of Azkaban with Snape.
And also, I suppose, as well, Goblet of Fire. Because when Harry casts it at Voldemort and he deflects it just with a wave of his hand, completely wandless magic, it blasts Harry over.
And likewise, when Dumbledore comes in to Barty Crouch Jr. to get him away from Harry, he uses Expelliarmus as well, and he flings him into a chair.
Exactly. He used it through the door, which I found to be quite fun.
He's that powerful.
He
doesn't even worry about obstacles.
No, he does not.
I get what you mean with Depulso, because there's so many other spells that are doing it. But I feel like some of the other spells that do those effects shouldn't be doing those effects.
Right. Well, here's one that I think is completely useless. Pesky Pixie Pestinomi. What is the point? In fact, anything that Gilderoy Lockhart casts, useless.
Honestly, I feel, again, it's such a niche spell.
So niche.
Like, I get in the Wizarding world, you've got things like denoming and pixies being a pest, but that is such a niche spell and it doesn't work.
It doesn't.
I completely agree. Just write it off. Don't even bother.
No.
Hermione's solution, much better. Just go with that. Just immobilize all of them and just pick them out of the air.
One by one.
Exactly. Throw them in the bin.
Take it out of the syllabus.
Exactly.
Standard book of spells. Get it out.
Rip the page out.
Rip the page out.
Don't even worry.
Goshawk.
Burn it.
Gone.
Yep. That book needs editing. If you could then have one spell that actually worked in real life, what would you pick?
Oh.
Asking the very serious questions now.
Oh, there is a few. Can I just... Then I need to pick one.
One.
Purely for convenience, Portus. I just make port keys all day, every day. Driving, M25. Who is she? I don't need to do that anymore. Flying, I'd be out of a job. However, I would just be commuting for convenience.
I think you've just blown my mind. I would never have thought about something like that. That is such a good one. That is such a good one to pick. Because then holidays, sorted.
Mm-hmm.
Getting to work. Sorted.
Mm-hmm.
That's too useful. That's too useful.
And the thing is as well, I mean, would you count apparition as a spell? Because it's not an apparition spell as such.
Well, I suppose it is, because you have to...
But there's not an incantation for it.
No, but you do need a wand to be able to do it.
In some cases. In fact, the majority of cases, but there has been cases where I think you don't need one because Voldemort didn't need one.
Do you know?
Not as far as I know, because remember when Lucius Malfoy's wand exploded?
Yeah.
He apparated away
Still
after
apparates
that.
away out. But is Voldemort just not a rare case?
He's just a very skilled wizard.
Yeah.
Albeit a very, very dark one, but he's got skills.
I suppose if you're only allowed one spell, you could get really good at that spell.
You really could, I suppose. You really could.
So would you still have Portus and have Portkeys, or would you apparate?
Probably still have port keys, but purely because you can go across countries, but whereas you can't apparate across countries.
That's true. Okay.
But think of the entrance if you were to apparate everywhere. Yeah, but I think I probably would stick with Portus. If I had to choose one, it would be that, but purely for convenience. But I couldn't just have one. That's the thing. That's where I'd struggle.
Okay, I'm going to be generous. If you had to then have another one, what would it be?
Oh, what would I have?
So you're so desperate to get the other spells in there.
Well, I want them all. That's the thing. I want them all. Probably Incendio.
Okay.
For a bit of pizzazz, bit of flash fire.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm always cold, so I like to have a fire with me. I'm always cold all the time. What would you have?
Probably something like Alohomora. Because then I could get away with never carrying keys again. I could always just go up to the door and just get myself in.
Fair enough. That's a good shout.
So I'd probably use that. The only trouble is with things like that is you need the reverse. So it's all right going around unlocking everything, but you then need to be able to lock back up again.
Exactly.
Okay, scrap that. I'm not going to pick Alohomora. I feel like that's a great one-way spell.
Yeah.
But probably not as useful as I got it in my head. Probably Wingardium Leviosa.
Okay.
Because at least that way you can lift things and then weight of objects doesn't matter.
Gone.
You don't have to worry about, I need to get that, I don't know, timber.
As you do.
You just, well, at the moment.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. You
Yeah.
are renovating.
Exactly. So that would be really handy just to be like, plasterboard. Hello. No.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Thank you. Just be like, plasterboard, Wingardium Leviosa. Whoosh. Done.
Or I could just trot in and just go, Reparo. Whole renovation done. You are done. B&Q, is she?
So yeah, I'd probably have Wingardium Leviosa because at least then it could be quite useful. You could just be kind of transporting things, getting things here to there, not having to worry about how heavy things are.
Mm-hmm.
What was your thoughts on the spells that they used in the films?
In what sense?
So let's go for, how do you think overall look-wise of spells in the films?
I thought they looked really good. Controversial opinion, not so much in The Prisoner of Azkaban.
Oh, how come?
The only one I think did it justice was Expecto Patronum, but everything else, it was just a bit, nah.
Well, I suppose you don't really see that many. I mean, Ridiculous, you kind of, it just happens and it's almost like a transfiguration spell. There's no flair, there's no pizzazz about it. It just happens.
Expelliarmus, that little bizarre sound effect, and then that's it.
Yeah.
There's no red beam that you would get as it was described in the books.
Yeah.
Or you've seen in the Goblet of Fire in every film thereafter.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, in the Chamber of Secrets, it was bright white/yellow from Snape.
But even at
that, it was a lot more dramatic than what it was in The Prisoner of Azkaban.
Exactly.
And don't get me wrong, as a film, I thought it was visually stunning. Like when you go, for me, it was never my favourite of the films. I know. But I stand by it. I do stand by it.
I suppose I do agree. I feel like the Prisoner of Azkaban, it did go really heavy with the wand sounds. The little, ooh.
I don't get me wrong. I think going from Chris Columbus to Alfonso, there was such a dramatic shift. And it was dramatic.
It was.
In the directing styles.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, visually the film is stunning. I get what it was trying to do. But it was just never ever one of my favourites. I'm not saying it was bad. Because none of the films were bad. Not a single one of them. But if I had to pick a favourite, it wouldn't be that.
Okay. Oh, I get where that comes from. And I feel like if you did take them out, literally just looked at them as a film, visually stunning. But in order, it goes from kind of like a child's film for the first two and then really dramatically changes to like an adult film in the third one.
Yeah.
And then kind of goes back to being lighthearted again in Goblet of Fire, obviously with a kind of like undertone.
Lighthearted? A boy died.
Well, at the end. But like throughout, it's very kind of like coming of age, adult, like teen film. I definitely agree with some of the directions that they went with. Not all of them. But for me, I'm trying to defend Prisoner of Azkaban because it is one of my favourites. It's like my go-to.
Okay.
If I have to pick. It's always between like Prisoner of Azkaban and Order of the Phoenix.
See, I don't know why, but that's always my last one to go to.
Really? What was your first one then?
Chamber of Secrets. It's a very sentimental one though. It was the first film that I ever watched and my dad took me to see it. Okay. So I've got sentimental reasons for that. And it's just always it just always has been my favourite. Plus McGonagall's monologue in that is chef's kiss.
I think the bit for me in terms of like the look of spells, I think the trouble for me is like how some of them are really like pizzazz and
over the top. And
then others, there's nothing. There's no little twinkle. There's no little kind of like, there's nothing. And I think going from the spells in the first one, so you're seeing things like Wingardium Leviosa, Alohomora, there's nothing happening there.
Yeah.
And then to go to the Chamber of Secrets where suddenly like everything is like a missile launcher.
Yeah.
And then suddenly...
Back in the Prisoner of Azkaban again.
Yeah.
Right, here's a question. So out of all the spells that we have seen on screen, which one stood out to you as being the most visually stunning?
I really don't want to keep harping back to Expecto Patronum.
But no, fair enough. I mean, it's a completely valid...
Because the thing is, like, it doesn't matter what film you've watched it in. That was the one that's stayed consistent.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've got it in The Prisoner of Azkaban, where that's how it looks, and it's nothing too exciting, but you've got the waves, you've got these kind of force field-esque bits pushing everything away, but you've got this kind of corporeal form, versus then Order of the Phoenix, where essentially it does the same thing, and then seeing it in the Deathly Hallows.
Yeah.
It's the one that kind of had the most consistency for me. That would probably be the one that had the most visually appealing, if anything.
Fair enough.
What about yours?
I think the spell may have been Incendio, but it's specific to when Harry and Dumbledore were in the Horcrux cave. And when Dumbledore wakes up from his sort of drug-induced stupor.
Yeah.
And battles off all the Inferi with that kick-ass cannonball of fire.
Yeah.
And parts the fire seal at Moses.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah. The Ring of Fire.
The Ring of Fire. And I think for such a film like The Half-Blood Prince, which is visually dark, like when you look at it, there is like that dark hue over the films. To then see that brightness of colour all of a sudden erupt onto the screen. And in such a dramatic way.
And the fact that it's so dramatic because the fact that that scene has been pretty much shot in black and white.
Yes.
Like, it's not.
All of it.
But essentially, that's the first bit where suddenly you've got light within that scene. So yeah, it definitely hits quite powerfully.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of spells that were described in the book that I wish were in the films because of how they were described visually.
Yes.
That then didn't happen. I think that's the bit for me of trying to pick a spell that looked visually appealing. I've got spells in my head that I'm like, well, they were visually appealing, but there are better ones out there.
Yep.
So that's kind of why I've ended up defaulting to Expecto Patronum.
Fair enough.
I suppose like the way that the shield spell worked when they're doing it over Hogwarts
Yeah.
looked amazing. The fact they went for like this organic shield where it's kind of veining out.
Yeah, and it's like growing and...
Yeah, like that was really clever. But there's so many other things that they did in terms of preparing Hogwarts that were better.
Exactly. That's the thing. And I think the whole preparing Hogwarts for the battle that ensued afterwards, you only seen a snippet.
Yeah.
There was so much more that was being done.
Yeah. Like each teacher had their own way of defending the castle.
Exactly.
But that was just kind of all cut. I mean, you kind of get a bit of sense of it because as the giants are going towards the building, you've got the devil's snare snatching up.
Mm-hmm.
So you get a sense of it, but the whole point is each professor had their own speciality and that's how they defended the castle.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I was all for Trelawney throwing
Prophecy orbs.
prophecy orbs
Yeah.
at the Death Eaters, but we can always hope.
We can always, yeah.
In terms of then spells and dueling
Mm-hmm.
from films to books and books to films, what are your thoughts? Did you think that it worked with how they did it?
I did. However, what I will say is if we're going to talk about dueling and spells, I have got a major bone of contention with the final battle between Harry and Voldemort. Because, and I'll tell you for why. So in the books, you've got this massive showdown where Harry reduces Voldemort down to the man that Tom Riddle is. He is not the most powerful dark wizard ever known. He is a man.
Mm-hmm.
He is a regular wizard. No Horcruxes left.
Yep.
No more ties to the mortal world with the exception of his own body.
Yep.
And you've got everyone in the Great Hall that are sort of circling around and watching this because they all know that the future of the wizarding world is hinging on this, what is happening right there, right now. If Voldemort wins, he wins. If Harry wins, then life goes back to what it was and they will try and rebuild, but they know that Voldemort is never coming back. And the fact that that battle in the film was sort of reduced down to Expelliarmus, Avada Kedavra, and then Voldemort disappeared into confetti. And visually, I get where they were coming from, and I thought it was quite good, but I wanted that man to hit the deck.
Yeah. I think that's the bit in the book that is him being a person.
Exactly.
I get where they're coming from visually, the connection between him in Philosopher's Stone and now.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole point is he's meant to die as a person.
Yeah.
And I feel like they got really caught up in Deathly Hallows Part 2 being a 3D film.
Yeah.
That putting it as like the confetti and the ashes, they were only really doing that because it then played into the 3D-ness
Exactly.
of that film. Dueling wise for me, actually, in terms of like the films, was okay.
Yeah.
At the beginning. But I feel like they reduced it a lot throughout the films.
Yeah.
So the whole point of dueling was the fact that you're meant to be outsmarting people, outwitting people, turns to wand connections all the time.
Yes.
Like when you get to the Deathly Hallows and you're looking in the background of all the characters and it's just wands connected via like a lightning cable.
Yeah.
Like that's not dueling in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
There's no outwitting, outsmarting, outmatching your opponent.
Mm-hmm.
It is purely just a case of like who's stronger.
Yeah.
They got so caught up with how it looked in the Goblet of Fire.
Yeah. And they
point,
use that as their blueprint for everything else.
Yeah. And it doesn't even make any sense to have that because it's like, what? So everyone in the battle is using Expelliarmus?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why is it those? Is it all spells? Doesn't matter what it is. Suddenly, all spells are now little bits lightning.
Yeah.
For me, the books, in terms of dueling and spells use, is just so much better.
Mm-hmm.
It is like, I'm going to talk about it now because I can't wait.
Okay.
The battle between McGonagall and Snape.
Yep.
is the biggest contention point I've ever had with films. We were all waiting for that moment to happen.
Yep.
And for it to be reduced to a few wand flicks and
That
a
was
hop, skip and a jump, and thrown out the window. That was all you got.
Mm-hmm.
No battle down the corridors, turning suits of armor, flinging knives, turning into butterflies. All of that. Nothing.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is where they fell down with the films in terms of spells.
Yep.
Is you negated all of those spells that were useful, were kind of there,
Mm-hmm.
to just kind of, okay, which one causes the biggest explosion?
Mm-hmm.
You don't even get to see, like, obviously McGonagall's casting non-verbal spells, so you don't even know what it is. It could be Confringo, it could be whatever.
Yeah.
So that's probably like my biggest contention with the spells in terms of going from a book to a film.
Yeah, exactly.
Visually, looks good. Actually, in terms of spell casting and dueling,
Yep.
No.
Nah.
it just makes it boring
Mm-hmm.
because there's no skill. It's just there to speed things up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that. Another thing as well that I would probably have a bit of a contention about is Molly Weasley and Bellatrix Lestrange's duel.
Ooh, okay.
Right, now don't get me wrong, one of the most anticipated moments in the whole of the film.
Mm.
So as soon as you read that in the books, you knew that it was coming.
Yeah.
And then when you were waiting for it
To happen.
to happen. So the whole build up to that would
Yeah.
be in Harry under the invisibility cloak, Bellatrix fighting, I think she was fighting 3 of the students. I want to say it was
Yeah.
Hermione, Luna and Ginny.
Yeah.
The 3 of them. She was fighting them all at the one time.
Mhm.
And then Molly Weasley rounds on her when she sees that that curse nearly killed Ginny.
Mm.
And then Harry jumps out underneath the invisibility cloak to save Molly Weasley from Voldemort's killing curse.
Mm.
And then all of that was just sort of like reduced down to all of 15, 20 seconds. There
Yeah.
was none of the after effect.
Yeah. There's no kind of dueling. You kind of just cuts and it's just like, oh, Bellatrix is obviously fighting Ginny. And then she just steps in. Like, albeit amazing scene. Like, I'm so glad they kept the line in.
Yes. Now, had they changed that, there would have been national outcry.
Exactly. I mean, it is such an iconic line.
Yeah.
And for me, it's just a hark back to like Aliens,
Yeah.
where Sigourney Weaver just comes in and it's just like, get away from her, you bitch.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that to me is just like, that is what a mother would do.
Absolutely.
But the duel itself, it's just flinging spells and just like blocking.
And that's pretty much it.
And that's it.
Yeah.
So again, it's that whole thing of in the books, so much more. Albeit, and then for her to disintegrate
Into nothingness.
into like the scattering, the confetti, it's like what? Dual Death Eaters just die in confetti?
Exactly.
Like she had the exact same death effect
As Voldemort did.
as Voldemort did. Why?
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't do it justice.
No.
So which film pulled off the spells the best?
So toss up between Goblet of Fire
Okay.
and Deathly Hallows Part 2. Because there was a lot
Okay.
more, there was a lot more visualness of spells happening in Deathly Hallows Part 2. I think it would be very difficult for you to say, albeit you disagree with some of the points, you can't say they didn't pull it off.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a lot going on, like a lot.
Yeah.
But whereas when you compare them to the other 7 movies before it, with the exception of Goblet of Fire, there wasn't really that much.
Mm-hmm.
What would you think?
It got very cookie cutter towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely all for like spells having a visual.
Yeah.
So compared to like Philosopher's Stone, where pretty much all the spells just didn't really have a visual to it, to Deathly Hallows, where even if it's like something,
Mm-hmm.
it's better that like it visually shows you where it is. It's like the lasers in Star Wars. Like when someone shoots a gun, you've got a laser trail.
Yeah, you've got a point of contact.
You've got a point of contact. You know where the spell's hitting. So for me, that is more visually appealing.
Mm-hmm.
So I do agree. And I think actually, in terms of what they did for Deathly Hallows Part 1 as well, with the fact that you've got things like when they're setting up the tents and you've got the kind of swishing of the lines. and
Now
everything.
that I did like.
Like that is really clever.
Yeah, I agree.
So even things visually like that is just better than nothing.
I agree.
I'd have to agree with Deathly Hallows being kind of like one of those two films.
Mm-hmm.
Goblet of Fire, I mean, I can't really recall that many spells from Goblet of Fire besides the Jewel in the Graveyard.
Aside the Jewel in the Graveyard. Okay, here we go. So, when I asked you about what your favourite spell would be, Mad-Eye Moody, Human Transformation, Draco Malfoy and a ferret. Visually appealing.
Yes, okay. But isn't that more the transfiguration aspect rather than the spell itself?
It's still a spell.
Yeah. But things like Accio,
Yeah.
a little weird twang in the air and...
Well, what were you
That's it.
expecting? Like a hurricane portal to bring it towards you?
I don't know, maybe like a lasso or
A lasso.
something.
Hell of a long lasso. to
Very
go
long
from
lasso. But there's like, in the books, there's so many other spells, like visually, like the compass spell. Like
Yeah.
that they could have done so much with, just never made it into the films. And then likewise, Wingardium Leviosa doesn't get an upgrade.
No, it never does it?
So it's just kind of like that. It's just there.
But
No
yeah.
little hover effect, no nothing. Just that's what it is.
Yeah. But saying that, think of Conjuring in the Dark Mark. Remember the first time you seen that?
That was pretty cool. Okay, I'll give you that. That was pretty cool.
And then you had all of the ministry workers, Barty Crouch, coming in, apparating into the campground where the Quidditch World Cup was, and they all scream stupefy. That was the first time you seen that.
Yeah.
And then they all converge amongst the three of their heads.
Mm.
But then you also get the other elements of different magic. For example, like the Durmstrang students, you see them coming in with their big poles and then breathing fire.
Mm.
And then you've got the Beaubaton people coming in, and they've got butterflies coming out of their jackets and this, all, that, and the other.
Yeah. With the Durmstrangs, I think what would have been cool to see is actually having them use like staffs like Moody
Yeah.
rather than wands. So like it really differentiated, like there's different styles of magic. It doesn't have to just be a wand. A wand is just a channel.
Yeah. Saying that as well, do you know what I really hope that they, at some point, this is just a bit of a side note, but talking about Hogwarts Legacy, at some point I really do hope they go more into detail about different wizarding schools and the way that they do magic. So I don't know if you've gotten to that stage of the game where you do the side quest with Natsu and I.
Oh, I've 100% of the game.
Oh, fab. Well, when Nats is talking about the fact that when she's in Wagadu, it's very unusual for them to use wands. They're all wandless magic.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like reserved for the most skillful witches and wizards within the UK. Voldemort did that. Dumbledore did that. There's virtually no one else who did that. But then all of a sudden, this 5th year transfer student comes like, oh yeah, we do that all the time. I'm
Yeah,
like,
that's like preschool.
exactly.
But then does that take away from the powerfulness of those people who then do wandless magic?
But who can say? That's the thing.
Because it's just, that's the way that they do things.
I know. What's your thoughts, dear listeners? What is your thoughts?
So, speaking of spells then,
Yeah.
what would, if you had to pick one branch of magic
Yep.
to focus in on, what area would it be?
Transfiguration. And I'll tell you for why. I know that it might. I am not biased before you say that, but before you even say anything, it's a very complex branch of magic, and it's not just necessarily pure totem locomotor. It's not just turning animals into water goblets. We're talking animagus. We are talking human to animal transfiguration on other people, not just yourself. I mean, you're literally taking one element of matter and changing it into something else. So you could literally build a whole arsenal of weapons should you require. There's so many other things that you could do. I mean, when you think about it, I suppose, Hogwarts itself, is that perhaps part of transfiguration magic? Did they conjure that out of fresh air? Because is conjuration magic the same as transfiguration almost? Because you are transfigurating matter?
Well, that's the thing. So, I mean, like, there isn't actually any kind of, well, to our...
best of our knowledge.
Yeah, there's no real conjuration magic.
No.
And I mean, we're not going into, like, Skyrim territories.
No,
but,
no,
like,
I was going to say, we're not, like, summoning
like demons.
Exactly.
But like,
No Daedra.
it's almost like transfiguration. Is that the same? Like, do you learn transmutation as within transfiguration?
I would think so.
So changing one material into another.
Yeah, I mean, I would think so.
Because I think this is the difference. It's like with transfiguration, does the spell only last as long as the caster is alive? In terms of transmutation, obviously it's a longer permanent fixture.
Mm-hmm.
So I think...
But interesting you're saying that because, well, when you think about Horace Slughorn, remember Lily Potter gave him that fish,
Exactly.
Francis?
Yeah.
And then the day after she died, Slughorn came down, looked in the fishbowl, and it was just a flower petal.
So this is the thing, is like transfiguration, although can be a long-lasting spell, isn't permanent. I think this is where like actually having that kind of differentiation is great, but they just haven't gone around to covering it.
Yeah. I mean, it's very difficult for you to then turn around and say that every spell is long-lasting. Or rather, you couldn't, for example, you couldn't say that every spell that was cast by someone is automatically reversed once they die.
Yeah.
Because Voldemort killed how many people? How many of them have come back from the dead? None of them.
Yeah. But then likewise, if Hogwarts is something that's been built from transfiguration magic, obviously the founders are completely like long gone.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the castle still stands. So there's still magic that is holding the castle up. Because obviously it's architecturally, the whole way it's described is it is not a building that could withstand normal building.
No, it's an architect's nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean, if that place was to be surveyed, it'd be shut down.
Yeah. So for that to be still standing, there's got to be some degree of long-lasting magic that's around.
But then again, could that perhaps be something that is not well-known or well-practiced magic in the 90s at the time of Harry Potter? Is it something...
Ancient magic.
Ancient magic.
Very true. Very true.
What is your thoughts, listeners? Write in, let us know.
I think if I had to pick one school of magic, it would probably be charms.
Okay, I was not expecting that.
No, what were you expecting?
I was going to say dark arts.
Oh, it's a close second, but I feel like...
It's very tempting, but it's very ethically unfriendly.
Yeah. Because you've got charms and hexes.
Yeah.
All within the kind of same branch.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like back when you think about what Hermione does in terms of charm-wise, she's very well-versed in charms.
Oh, I mean, that woman is like the Swiss Army knife of that group. She knows everything.
Exactly. And I mean, the practicality and the uses of it, the fact that when she's doing the list for the order, the fact that it's a bewitched list, that if the charm that's on it is when they sign it, if they break the secrecy, they come out in poxes.
Do you know, for the life of me, I seen this on Instagram a few days ago, and someone had asked, what is the spell that Hermione uses to enchant that gold galleon? And I have been desperate not to Google it because I've been trying to look in the deepest recesses of my brain to remember, and I still can't remember.
Does it actually tell you, though, what the charm
does.
it is? Oh, God, okay. Because obviously they're fake galleons.
Mm-hmm.
They're not real. Or does she transfigure one to be?
No, I think... they are sort of fake galleons, I believe, but it's... On the coin, it will tell all the DA members when the next meeting is. But I can't remember the name of the bloody spell.
No, I can't off the top of my head. Help us out.
Please. For my own sanity.
But I think, yeah, so that's probably why I'd probably pick charms, because it's so useful. I mean, you've got things like Incendio, you've got the Bluebell Flame, you've got
Right.
Lumos.
Coming back onto that, I hate to cut you off, but this is something that has riddled my brain with thought. Bluebell Flames and Incendio. Is it the same thing?
No. So, difference is Incendio, actual fire, causes damage, harm.
Yeah.
Bluebell Flame, cold to the touch, no heat, more light source. So it's essentially your campfire, but it's a blue flame that you can float.
So is that Lacarnum Inflammari?
No. So that then is something completely different, because I feel like that was something that they put in the films.
Is that like an Incendio prototype?
Yeah.
Okay, fair.
That was kind of like testing the water.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas they didn't have a spell. Because in the books, there is no description of what the spell is.
No.
So they had to make things up and I think they were going for, well, everything's kind of Latin based.
Yeah, which is fair.
And so I kind of get where they're coming from, but I think what they ended up with the books being Incendio just works. It's short, it's sharp, it works. But I think we could probably go into so much detail with each school of magic, and I think that's going to be a whole branch of episodes later on down the line. So I think we won't go too much into it then.
Yeah, I agree.
Because we could literally talk for hours on it. But I think that wraps up everything quite nicely actually with this. So
I think this wraps up Spells episode 1 of God knows how many.
Yeah, part 1 of ...
Exactly, yeah.
So we'll leave it there, guys. And as always,
thank you very much for tuning in with us this week, and we will see you next time for chapter 3 of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, The Letters from No One.
So keep your radios tuned in, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.